Hey, wow, I had no idea you were gonna be here. Honestly, seriously, I had no idea. I didn't know. Thanks for clicking on my face and watching this video, and hopefully you continue watching this video. Here, we're gonna talk about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, the latest in a series of remasters, arguably a little bit more than a remaster in some ways, of the latest generation, or for the latest generation of hardware. Let me just say this, I don't think that there's much I could say about Crisis Core that hasn't already been discussed, or said, or at the very least this reunion, what hasn't been already said before since it's come out. Especially as I'm a Crisis Core newbie, I've never played the original, but regardless, I love Final Fantasy VII. I love the original's world and characters, so I always knew that if they remastered Crisis Core, I was gonna play it at some point. Even if they didn't remaster it, I was gonna go back. But then when they said they were remastering it, I figured this is the best time to go and play it. I don't gotta dig up that PSP or try to figure out how to emulate it or anything, because that'd be a whole day's worth of hassle or whatever. So obviously, as people have discussed this game and reviewed it, I'm not going to do that here, but I thought it'd be fun as a kind of new fan of the game, talking about everything from my perspective, everything I thought was probably like the best part of the game, the worst, the okay, or even the dated parts of Crisis Core Reunion, or Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. That is a word salad if there ever was one. That is such a long title. Of course, if you like the video, maybe subscribe, but if you don't, that's okay too. I'm not going to be mad at you, at least not forever. Maybe not forever. Let's start on a positive note and talk about something positive. The graphics and the visuals. They are great. They're gorgeous. They're fantastic. Now, it's easy to say that, but really, I encourage you to look back at how the original game looked, and at the time, maybe it looked great on PSP. You'd have to tell me how you felt at the time if you played it. I'm sure it looked great, but they did a great job here dressing up this old PSP game and making it look absolutely on par in some ways with a lot of modern games. The energy is the same as if you got a new pair of the same shoes you've been beaten to death. It's the same pair, but now it looks nicer because it's new, or it's newer. The improvements were immediately noticeable across the board, from the magic of a spell being cast on screen to the appendages of different enemies, and even in the faces and how much cleaner they look and how much more detailed. With a lot of remakes and remasters, a lot of what you like here is going to be up to you, and if you like the new visuals here, of course, that's also up to you. I'm sure there's going to be a good amount of you out there that'll be furiously stomping your feet, just like, man, what the hell? Furiously typing a comment to tell me the original game just looks so much better than any other game released today, and the visuals look like, I don't know, somebody grabbed your mom's car and painted it rather poorly and then tried to gaslight you by telling you, actually, it came out pretty great, don't you think? Yeah, it did, didn't it? I joke, obviously, but reasonable minds can disagree. So just from my point of view, the game looks great and even holds up perfectly admirably on 60 FPS on modern hardware and consoles. I don't think I noticed any significant drops when it mattered the most, and if I did, I don't remember them, so that could be a me thing, but I think it works fine. There's of course some wonkiness there because, again, this is a dressed up PSP game, so animations often feel stiff, old, awkward, but it's a remaster, so it's understandable given that. It's easy to throw our hands up and say, Square Enix, you should have went a step further and just remade it entirely, but I suspect we are already in some ways encroaching upon what is a normal remaster, like probably going past it a little bit and edging into kind of remake territory. And since not everyone is going to love the remaster or even the remake changes or what a remake brings or remaster brings, this was probably their safest bet. Now, when we talk about the dated stuff, I don't know how this is going to go for me, honestly. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of shit, but just so nobody thinks I'm all flowers and rainbows here, let's go into it. In my opinion, one of the most dated aspects of this Crisis Core remaster, the missions. Now, I know it's a PSP game. It has these trappings of trying to make a game like this work on a portable console, so you have tons of missions with a lot of reused enemies and reused environments with battles that can last anywhere from like 30 seconds to 5 minutes about 95% of the time, with exceptions of course. And especially with the revamps to combat, it's honestly a blast to play these missions at first. I'm not saying I had a problem playing them, but I'm just saying if you're going for 100% completion and you want to get that platinum trophy, which, listen folks, we all want to get that platinum trophy. Even if you don't think you want it, you kind of want it, be honest. You're going to need to complete every mission though. It can really be a drag, considering every time you join a fight you're greeted to
activating combat mode
and
conflict resolved.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you can kind of turn it into a positive here. In a way, it can be kind of like a treasured memory. I don't know, you and your housemates can make that kind of term of endearment, make it a term of endearment to each other. Maybe they hear you playing a lot and they want to figure out a way they can work it into conversation. Or maybe it's something they can now use to let you know that they're about to fight you. Maybe the other day when you were hanging out, you were eating your mac and cheese or whatever, you left some dishes in the sink. You shouldn't have done that. And you just hear it from afar.
Activating combat mode.
Missions are stacked within one another, so you're not just doing missions, but sub-missions. And granted, it is totally worth it to play a lot of the missions. They provide you with the ability to level up your materia, and even Zack himself, and you get useful items that can help you in later parts of the game. That doesn't change the fact that playing a lot of the missions can be kind of a drag and even grindy. The easiest thing to do, in my opinion, is to turn on a podcast or a video to distract you from the tedium of fighting the same enemies and going through the same maps over and over and over again. Especially considering every mission involves the kind of same setup. It involves you just fighting a bunch of enemies and opening chests. It inevitably creates this been there, done that, yeah, okay. Activating combat mode, okay. I do enjoy the gameplay enough and it helps me level up and get better gear, but rarely does it ever feel fully satisfying to kind of grind through hours of missions. Recognizing this was the limitations of being on a handheld, it's not something that has super aged well or aged very well in my opinion when we have much more modern gameplay sensibilities. And I'm not above grinding through games to get to where I ideally want to be, I'm not saying I am, but it doesn't mean we can't speak to how tedious this mission design ends up being for the modern day. Your other option is to not engage with the missions as much, but you could be under leveled by the time you get into the end game, and that's a mistake you don't want to make. I mean, you could also be way over leveled like I was in the end game, but that was pretty awesome, let's be honest. I always love that. Now, I know the argument against that is that the time it came out, it's a PSP game, it's not a remake, and that it's a beloved PSP game at that, and it's not to be messed with. I can get on board with that, but that doesn't make it any less tedious for me because it's a good game. It is a good game, but it is still tedious. There's also an argument that can be made here that the missions are meant to be tedious because, well, it's meant to mirror how Zack or the player is meant to feel about being a soldier or working for Shinra. Recently, I was watching a video from creator King K, and he does a lot of retrospective game content that I've grown to really enjoy. You should check him out. But he was talking about in this video Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, and he suggested that the tedium of completing missions for Organization 13 over the 17 hours he played that game, it can kind of be viewed as an intentional or something of a perfect way of hammering home that narrative in a gameplay way. Hammering in the narrative of Roxas feeling jaded with his time with the organization by, I guess, boring you or really making it grindy. Similarly, we can argue that Zack's barrage of missions is meant to invoke a similar feeling, but I'm not a fan of that argument to be honest because it's just too much, and no amount of explaining away why there's this much repeatable and reused environments with these missions will make it better for me. It's just a part of the game that has not aged super well. To be clear, I'm okay with it, but it won't make it better. The next one I have here is going to be a bit controversial, but it's unavoidable here. With Crisis Core Reunion, the entire English voice cast was replaced with the new voice cast from Final Fantasy VII Remake, along with some new voice actors that were casted for Reunion. The result is honestly a mixed bag depending on how you look at it. To be clear, I still found the game engaging and the story as well. That cannot be understated. I don't want to understate that. But I think there's some bizarre delivery here and there, and you'll definitely hear that throughout, especially if you're comparing back and forth. And it results in some of the voice acting feeling a little bizarre or off. I know the biggest point of contention with this game with fans, and the most notable one for me, of course, as well, being Caleb Pierce, Zack's new voice actor. I can't pretend that I have some attachment to his former voice actor, given I have never played the original game, so this is not just another dogpile on the new Zack, but I did do a little homework before I made this video, and I listened to some of it from the original game back in the day. I also listened to it back to back. Thanks to some really awesome YouTubers who made videos playing them side by side. I appreciate you. The only conclusion I could come to is that some of the line delivery is exactly the same and others are very similar, but just a tad different. This part nobody's gonna really like, but I'll just say it anyway. I think Pierce does a fine job carrying the mantle of Zack. You can flame me in the comments if you want, but that's just like my opinion, man. The performance didn't blow me away by any means, but it was serviceable enough where I was still able to enjoy the story. And this is a theory that I have, but I honestly feel like the voice cast or the voice direction or the voice cast was to kind of just mimic the original game's voices as much as possible, or at least match match their tone and delivery, which can result in some of the actors feeling kind of stilted in their lines. My guess being this was done for the consistency between Final Fantasy VII Remake and Crisis Core, given that Zack is theorized, based on the ending of Remake, is that Zack is theorized to have a bigger role in the remake project than he did in the original Final Fantasy VII. In fact, I would point to Zack's dialogue in Final Fantasy VII Remake being the clear indicator that there's a big difference between the two performances. But again, I don't want to dogpile on the guy too much. Everyone else was pretty serviceable, though I will point out my favorites, of course, are Cody Christian as Cloud and Brianna White as Aerith. They do an incredible job, I think, together and separate and in their different roles. They really add depth and emotion to their respective characters in the scenes they do have in Crisis Core, even if they're not that many. Okay, let's calm down here. Let's try to get back to some positive stuff. The gameplay, Crisis Core is fantastic. This remaster is fantastic in its gameplay, especially when you're comparing the original gameplay to the remaster. It feels much closer in respect to where Final Fantasy VII Remake landed, and it's better for it. You have the basic 3 to 4 combo attacks, of course, and otherwise you can hit R1 and use spells and abilities you have equipped. Of course, that depends on the different materia that you have equipped, as well as equipment to boot and to do more damage. That will let you do more damage, buff Zack to your heart's content. I continue to love Final Fantasy VII's magic and ability system, and in Crisis Core as well by extension. There's something just uniquely satisfying about slotting in different items into your weapon or gear or your character, and then leveling them up individually, mixing and matching various ones to get different types of builds and buffs for your character and your different stats. There's something just very flexible about it, I find, where you can kind of have different sets of materia for different situations and change them before encounters and just kind of be ready for anything. And you, of course, are always seeing that progression of Zack as your materia is always improving. Truly, you can kind of at some point make a fuck all build with magical punch or costly punch, allowing you to effectively break the game or break the damage limit, I should say, and even hit that secondary damage limit. And in that regard, it makes the game rather trivial at that point, but even so, it's a lot of fun. Materia Fusion 2 provides another way to customize your builds. You can get certain attacks, or you can attach certain stat buffs to these different materia. It's surprisingly deep for a game that was relegated to the handheld until now. You can block as well, but especially once I got to a high enough level, I found it was just easier to sustain the damage, heal, and then brute force my way through fights. The downside being, you will probably need to account for status effects like stun, sleep, poison, and even curse or death. And that, I can't lie, there were encounters where you'll find yourself stuck in kind of like a stun, only to watch as the enemies deplete your health entirely or almost instantly, which causes you to be in this loop of just reloading and trying again, trying to brute force your way through. The good news here is that combat is quick and painless for the most part, so you'll never have to wait too long or have to begin a long-winded fight over again, because most encounters are very short, Minerva notwithstanding. But with better camera controls, more reliable combat, and endless ways you can build and customize Zack, it has a sense of non-linear progression where you'll always have instances where you'll have to tweak things and change things up, which means even when you grind away at every mission, you'll still seldom feel like you're not getting anything from them or getting some kind of progression, even if it's just like a few levels here and there or some good gear or some good items. Another aspect of the game I think is kind of fine, but also kind of dated. I guess okay, depending on how you look at it. The DMW system, or Digital Mind Wave, essentially a set of reels that play in the top left-hand corner of the screen that settles on various slots. When the numbers match up, you can get anything from a summon, a limit break, or like a temporary buff of sorts, or you level yourself up, or you have materia that you have equipped level up. I do find myself conflicted in that sense about it. Thematically, it makes sense. Soldier operatives, lore-wise, are made to recall memories in battle to help them with fights. Hence why Zack's emotions sometimes run high through the story, which ups the chances of certain images appearing in the DMW. You get certain memories that can give you different level limit breaks, but I just never felt like fully engaged with this system. I know RNG exists in games, but maybe in some I love, of course, too. But the way it was implemented here, it just kind of feels like a crapshoot. I never knew what was going on. I could just be kind of dumb, but we already knew that. So I think it's just the fact that like it feels like a crapshoot. Whether you want to see every memory or just get certain summons or limit breaks that could help you, it just feels all luck based. Even leveling up Zack or Materia felt entirely random, and I wasn't entirely sure if I needed to do something differently or not, or maybe I did something wrong. I felt like I missed something, and honestly the game isn't so difficult where you need to be engrossed or on how it works. As long as you're okay with random numbers and images popping on the screen, it's serviceable, but not as rewarding as it probably intends to be. Lastly, let's end on a super positive note. The story here, in my opinion, takes a while to get going, I'll be honest. But once it does, around that halfway point, things start becoming clearer for me on what was really going on. It starts to narrow its focus on what is actually going to inevitably lead into Final Fantasy VII. And at that point, I was on board. The first half of the story, again, is a lot of setting up and teeing up characters and plot threads, and to the uninitiated like myself, it can feel a little confusing and maybe at times a little convoluted, but then you hit that point of, oh, okay, I get it now, and it all becomes clear. Inevitably, you hit that end, and it's just very poignant, especially knowing what we know about the new Final Fantasy VII Remake game and Rebirth. I think my bias of just finally seeing the events that lead into Final Fantasy VII made it even more significant to me. I don't want to spoil the story at all, suffice to say whether it's your first time or you're playing for the first time, using this as an addition to Final Fantasy VII, it gets high marks from me. It gets surprisingly deeper and more emotional than I was probably anticipating, even though I kind of knew what to expect. And this is why for me, this is one of the best aspects of the game. In the same vein is that atmosphere. Just walking around Midgar with only music playing, man, I love this world so much, and the music just complements it so well. That feeling of dread and rust and grime, it serves this story well, and even adds a level of character to the world that it wouldn't otherwise have. A story of people stuck in a corporate megastructure they're powerless to influence or control, and one that is too large to fail. Thanks for tuning into this video. I knew I wanted to make a video about Crisis Core because I love Final Fantasy VII so much, but I wanted to make this Crisis Core video, but I just didn't know if this was going to be the right format for it or the proper format. So hopefully this one turned out okay. If you liked the video and want to see more like it or see things similar to it, or if you like the format, let me know. Subscribe, comment, like, dislike, whatever. Do whatever you think is necessary to get your message out to me. Until then, I'll see you in the next one, and thanks for being so handsome, because goddamn you're handsome. Hey there, I know the video ended, but I just wanted to tell you about some of the other really cool videos I made that are on the screen now. I don't know which ones they are, but I promise they are above average at minimum, but you have things to do. So if you can't, really no sweat, no hard feelings. I'll see you later. Also, really big hats off to you for getting this far. I bet you're just incredibly smart and strong. Yeah, you gotta be. Okay, I'm gonna let the video officially end now. Enjoy your life, okay?